Hello everyone, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. This is Jeffrey, and for this lesson we will be looking at tones and textures. So what exactly is tone? Or as some people call it, shading. And how important is it in art? Tone or shading simply refer to the light or dark areas of an object when it is lit by a light source. Here's a sketch of the Armenian church in progress. I start with a light pencil sketch to block in the proportions and the big shapes, and then go on to complete the rest of the details with a sketch pen. This is how the church looks like. I'm sketching only part of the church because I was particularly interested in the spire. That's the pointy conical structure you see here, and a silhouette of Christ and a cross in the foreground. Here's the completed sketch, mostly shapes and outlines. Don't you think it looks a bit plain and flat? Looking at the photo again, you realize there are interesting shapes or light and dark tones created by the cast shadows on the building. These shadows help to create depth and form. If you look at this sketch again, you'll notice that I have actually penciled in the shapes, ready to add in the grey tones over the building. This is how it looks like after the grey tones were added. Compared with the plain looking outline sketch, which do you prefer? Which sketch has more punch and depth? This is what tones can do to your sketch. The grey tones were added with a brush pen with diluted black ink. In the following examples, you see that I sometimes use hatching and cross-hatching textures to create tones as well. This is Chai Seng Huat Hardware, a popular cafe joint, and this is the sketch. You notice I've added the tones using the diluted brush pen again, and these are texture lines using hatching and cross-hatching techniques. Of course, if you look carefully, I've added some other elements that were not in the picture, like this passerby and the motorcyclist. Often adding human figures will create a sense of scale and interest in a sketch. This is La Tienda, found in Juchet, and this is a place that I sat while sketching, quite near to the dustbin. So the finished sketch looks like this. So again, I've added hatching as well as cross-hatching textures. So hatching refers to parallel lines that you draw, and you create tones by adjusting the spacing between the lines as well as using a thicker pen. So this is cross-hatching, and this is hatching, which are single lines. Here's another place. This is Kampong Kapo Methodist Church. This is how the church looks like. So the sketch here is without the tones, and after adding the tones, it looks something like this. This is a sketch in progress done at Petien Road, which is just off Jalan Besar. So this sketch took about maybe 45 minutes or 30 minutes to come up with this initial blocking in. And then here's a completed sketch with the buildings in the background. So if you look at a close-up of this sketch, you see that I've used both tonal techniques, which is the ink wash you see here, the gray values, as well as the texture using hatching and cross-hatching lines. And if you can remember how to draw trees, this is an example of the trees done with the M and W strokes, as well as some visible leaves. Over here you see the brush pen that I was talking about. So you see that it has a body that can hold water. So in this case I put diluted black ink into this chamber. This is a sketch of Tiong Bahru. Again, I've applied the tonal values using the diluted ink as well as the texture of the cross-hatching and hatching. And this is a sketch of your school building. So I'll be talking more about this sketch later on and guiding you through the process. But just to show you, this is an example again of the tonal values added to the rooftop. So can you see the hatching lines as well as the hatching lines here, as well as the grey tones that's added to give the building a dimension. Now that you have seen tones and textures in urban sketches, let's take a step back to see how light and shadow work on everyday objects in a smaller setting. To illustrate, here's a white cup under general ambient lighting. We change this to black and white so it's easier to see. The wall and table surface are also white. But do you notice the subtle changes of tones in this picture? The left side of the cup is slightly brighter. That's because there's a soft light coming in from the left. The right side of the cup is actually in shadow, but remains quite visible and is well lit. There's a soft, faint cast shadow that's almost not visible. In the background, there's a clear separation of the wall from the table, and all this is achieved with just small changes or differences in tonal values. So in other words, although everything in the picture is white, the cup, the table and wall are all white, we are still able to make out the form of the cup, table and wall. They don't simply disappear or become invisible because everything is in white. If you were to sketch this in pencil, you would have to study the tonal values carefully and apply the right shade of grey in the appropriate areas to replicate this picture. That is the main idea behind shading. It's not about putting light grey or dark grey areas anyhow or anywhere, but rather carefully observing the specific value, the lightness or darkness within each shape you see. Now let's change the lighting drastically. Here you see a strong, harsh light coming in from the left. Just look at the contrast of tones on the cup. There's an abrupt change of tones. One side is extremely bright, while the shadow side is very dark. There's also a strong cast shadow with hard edges on the right. The inside of the cup is also dark. That's because it's not getting much light. Again, if you were to sketch this in pencil, you would have to apply darker tones overall and create stronger value contrasts in many areas. For example, there's now a greater difference in value between the edges of the table and the wall, so you can see the separation more clearly. The 5-step value scale. Here is a simplified value scale showing only 5 steps, with pure white on the left and pure black on the right. In other words, from light value to medium to dark value. Create this 5-step value scale in your sketchbook. The dimensions of the entire block will be 10 cm for the entire length and 3 cm for the height. So each of the smaller blocks will be 2 cm wide. Use your pencil to shade the grey values, starting lightly on the left and pressing harder to get to the darkest value on the right. Do not draw a black dark line separating the different blocks or tones. If your tones are correct, they will automatically create an edge or separation from the previous or next tone. It is important that you increase the values progressively and consistently. Now we'll start by drawing some shapes on the paper. So use your long ruler and we'll just draw some squares on your paper. So you can use both edges of your long ruler to create two lines. Then maybe move your ruler down a little bit and draw another two parallel lines with the top edge as well as the bottom edge of your ruler. And one more row. So this is a very simple way of drawing squares on your paper. Next, you rotate the ruler 90 degrees and we'll draw some squares using both edges of the ruler again. So this will very quickly give you a series of squares. Alright, now we'll start drawing the hatching patterns. You can use any pen, so maybe a 0.2 or 0.3 will be okay. So I'm going in with the first hatching pattern that you see in your notes. So the hatching pattern is just straight lines or parallel lines in one direction. So you can go ahead and try to draw it within the first square that you've created. So keep your lines parallel and consistent, as well as keep the spacing consistent. And then draw it all the way to the bottom. So sometimes if you're not careful, your lines can be crooked or they will bend at a funny angle. Alright, so if everything goes well, you should have lines that look like this, so they're all aligned consistently with equal spacing. Next, you will draw the vertical strokes. So again, some of you may have some difficulty through doing that. Alright, so this is the vertical hatching lines. And next we'll do the 45-degree lines. So this will be quite interesting. You start with an approximate angle, and again the lines get longer as you progress downwards. Okay, almost finishing. Now the other way is tricky for me, so you see what you can do. So I'm just going to start from here at a 45-degree angle. Make your way to the other corner. Okay, so the lines are not very perfect, but generally you have hatching lines. Next, we'll try to do cross hatching. So again, you go in with your pen, starting with the vertical strokes. So for cross-hatching, it simply means overlapping. So overlapping direction. The most common overlap will be at 90 degrees. So here I'm going back in with another layer of lines, overlapping the first vertical stroke with the horizontal strokes. Right, so now you can change the angle to 45 degrees for the first layer. Okay, now we go back in with the other side, 45 degrees. Okay, so this is 45 degrees. Cross-hatching at 45 degrees. Now we can do it with another angle. So maybe this one will be like around 75 degrees. So it just produces a slightly different texture. Then now you come across with this other angle in the opposite direction. Alright, so coming down to the last row, we want to learn about spacing as well as the line thickness. So for the first square, I'm just going in with a very light stroke, and I'm going to increase the spacing so that it becomes quite loose and quite open to illustrate the effect of thin lines and big spacing, which will give you an overall light tone. So I'm using the same pen but less pressure. And now for the second square, I'm going to use the same pen, but this time I'm going to make the spacing very tight. Okay, so this is the same pen, but now I'm making the lines very close to each other. So this really calls for concentration. Okay, so in terms of the tone, if you compare the first, the square on the left with the one on the right, you can say that this is a darker tone, right? Or maybe a medium. So let's put this as light, and this we'll call it medium. All right. So for the third square, I'm going to demonstrate what a dark tone really looks like. So I'm going to go in with a 0.8, slightly thicker pen, and keeping the spacing very tight as well. So this is a thick pen, and making the spacing tight as well. Okay, so you can see that it's quite dark, but not quite. So let me just change to a thicker pen so you can see the effect more prominently. So I'm going in with a 1 point pen. So this is a really thick pen, and immediately you can see the difference. Again, keeping the line very tight but not touching each other, so there's still a small gap. Okay, so we can call this dark because there's a tonal difference between this and this. So this is what I mean by contrast and different tonal values. So light, medium, dark, using hatching. Now if you were to continue and do the other textures on this fourth piece, so I'll start with the moderate spacing. Okay, so this is the first stroke, and then we'll have the second stroke coming down. So we just do a generic spacing, so following the same spacing perhaps. Okay, so we're going to come back in with another layer on the right half. So let's do a cross hatching in this 45-degree angle. So in comparison, you see the left side is much lighter than the right side because this has another extra layer. So let's take this bottom space and we're going to do cross hatching from another angle, the opposite direction. So this will be another 45 degrees from the other side on this quarter of the space here. Okay, so this is an even darker tone than this one. So by varying the spacing, the pen thickness, as well as the number of layers, you can see that there's a range of tones you can achieve. So similarly for the scribble texture, you can start with a general scribble. So again, the scribble is not a loops, it's a your pen is moving erratically, left, right, up and down. So I'm just going to go back in with another layer on the half, on the left side of this shape. So I'll go back in with another overlapping stroke. So you can see that the tone is much darker now compared to the right side. Okay, so just by overlapping with another layer of scribble, you get a difference of tone. And let's carry on here as well, maybe the same tone, make it dark. And we're going to make this really dark on the right side, bottom right side. Okay, so this is the bottom right side. Now I'm just going in with another layer, filling in most of the gaps. So there is a difference between doing this and just coloring the whole thing black. Then you have a flat tone with no texture. Okay, however, if you do it with scribble, overlapping strokes, you see that there is still a texture. Right? So we have the darkest layer here, darkest tone here. This is the lightest, this is medium. Right? So this shows you that by overlapping the strokes, changing the angle and changing the thickness of your pen, you can create a variety of textures as well as tones. In this segment, we will apply tones and textures to several common objects, starting with a cube using hatching and cross-hatching, a sphere with contour and cross-contour lines, and lastly, a foxtail using organic texture. Now we're going to apply the textures you have created, the simple hatching or cross-hatching, onto an object. So the easiest object to apply on is the cube. So I'm going to draw a cube here. So you notice also that I've erased the pencil lines, leaving just the hatching strokes and cross-hatching strokes. So this is how it should look like. It should be able to support the square shapes that you've drawn without having to outline in pen. Right? So this is what the hatching and cross-hatching should be able to do. So I'm creating a simple cube here with my pencil. And then we're going to fill up this cube with simple hatching and cross-hatching. So this will be the shadow. Right. So the light is coming from this way, and maybe starting from the top. Now that I've got the shape of the cube, we'll go in with the first texture, which is the hatching on the top. So again, this surface I want it to be very light, so I'm just going in with very light lines and big spacing. And now we want to come back in with this face, which is medium tone, and we do that by tightening up the spacing as well as pressing slightly harder on the pen. So I'm using the same pen as I did for the top surface, but this time I'm exerting more pressure. And then for the last surface, we're going to increase the thickness of the pen, or we could also use the same pen and do a cross-hatching here. Okay, so why not we do that? We'll use the same pen, but we'll tighten up the spacing as well as do cross-hatching, so that this face, which is away from the light, gets to be the darkest tone. Now next we want to come in with an overlapping line, and we'll do cross-hatching. So we're going to go in with the cross-hatching line at 90 degrees, which means this vertical line is downwards. Alright, so you can see the three surfaces. This is a light tone. Just write it down. This is light. This will be medium. And this will be dark. Now for the shadow, we will try to use a very thick pen that I used earlier on, 1 point. And let's do it in this direction. So keeping your spacing tight. Okay, so this is the completed cube. This is the darkest, the shadow area is the darkest. Alright, so this is the demonstration on hatching, cross-hatching, and tonal values using the 5 variables. So this is thin lines with wide spacing, medium lines with tight spacing. This is thick lines with tight spacing, as well as the overlapping of strokes to create the different tones. And we are applying it onto a simple shape, which is the cube. So let's erase the pencil lines, and you can see that the cube would stand on its own without the supporting outline strokes. Okay, so if you do it well, it should look something like this. So now we are going on to understand more about contour as well as cross-contour lines on the rounded object. So I have here a bowl, a simple plastic disposable bowl. So you can see there are some ridges or lines along the edges. And because it's round, you see that the lines will bend and they kind of disappear towards the back. Okay, so with the lines you can, and as well as the lighting, so this side is brighter, this side is in the shadow. So that's tones and values. And with lines, you can see that the object is curved. Right? It has a volume and it's curved. So if I were to draw parallel lines along the side of this bowl, so let me just show you how I do it. So this is an example of a bowl with parallel lines. So I've gone in to use a marker to draw the lines. Right? So these are called contour lines. So if we look at it from the side view, the contour line is actually like parallel to the edges of the bowl. Alright, so along with this other side would be the cross contour lines. Okay, so you notice the lines will go this way and then they disappear to the back. Okay, start from here and then they disappear to the back. So if I were to draw contour lines, it will be something like this. So it helps to describe the surface and the contours. Okay, so with the lighting as well, this is a highlight area, this is the shadow area. You can see that the lines actually describe the surface. Now let's try and draw this like a sphere on paper. So you can start by, if you need to draw something round, you can use a container. So I'm just going to go in with this round container that I have here. Okay, or you can do freehand. So with that done, I'm going to go in with a pen to have the outline of this circle. Or you can actually start drawing with the pen earlier on when you're tracing the shape. Okay, so this is a circle. And now we want to introduce a contour line. So I'll start with somewhere in the middle. So this is how the contour line might look like. So it bends and goes back. And this is going towards the back of the sphere. So this is the first contour line, and then we'll add in other contour lines. So you want to make sure that they kind of give the object a round look. Okay, going around this way. This is coming from behind and coming down to the front, making its way to the back, but it's beginning to reveal itself. So maybe over here I'll start to have a more prominent elliptical shape here. Okay, maybe one more. Okay, and let's try and complete the rest of it below. As the lines move further down the sphere, you can also make the spacing a little bit tighter because of perspective. So the lines are more cramped together. Okay, so this sort of represents it looks like the lantern, the Chinese lantern. Alright, so for this part, the top part of the sphere, we're going to do something different, which we want to have the lines coming in this way, because we want the lines, the cross contour lines, to eventually make it look as though it's going into a hole in the middle. Okay, so let's do that. So I will start with the first cross contour line, which will be sort of a straight line in this way from the top to the bottom. And the lines on the right will start to bend a little bit because it is a sphere, right? So the lines will continue bending. As it approaches the bottom, it bends and it disappears into the bottom. Okay, so there you have it's like a wireframe of a spherical object. Okay, so you notice these cross contour lines and contour lines, they give the flat circle a three-dimensional form. Now I'm going to do something which will make it look as though there's a hole in the middle and the lines are going inwards. So you continue the cross contour lines or contour lines, making them go into this hole in this way. So this creates the illusion that this is coming over and going into this hole. Next we'll do a foxtail. So the foxtail, maybe you can do a pencil sketch of the general shape. So the foxtail, as you all know it, it has a white tip, which we want to indicate here. This will be the white tip and it comes from here. Okay? And we want to study the light and shadows as well as texture. So you go in with a light stroke. So you do not want to outline the shape of this with a hard edge, but rather use the pen to draw several short hairs or long hairs, and you slowly build up the texture. So this here is the indication of the area that is supposed to be white. So just go in with very, very light strokes, and make sure your lines for the fur will bend to the left and right, because it's not a straight line. Right? It's not a straight line like this. That'll be very stiff. So you want the lines to bend and have a bit of a natural looking feel to it. Okay, so because this part will be light, because it's going to be white, I'm going to leave it very open with not much texture. And then I'm just going in on the left side with the tail, the darker side of the tail, but building up on the texture. So this will take a while, so we might want to speed up the video from now on to let you see the process faster. Okay, so you can see the layering of the fur, where the bottom part of the tail is slightly darker because it's in shadow, and there's a form, which is the lights coming from the top. This is the white part of the tail. Alright, so when you erase the pencil strokes, see the foxtail. So this is the white tip, this is the brown area. Fur, so do not draw an outline, a hard edge, so let it be soft fur, and this is the brown tip. So I hope this video has been helpful in your learning of tones and textures. So how to create tones using hatching and cross hatching, as well as changing direction, angles, spacing, and the length of lines to help you achieve the correct texture. So take care, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!